On the distant planet of Viridia, a quiet tension hung in the air. This lush world, with its towering trees and vibrant flowers, had once been a peaceful place for human colonies. Now, fear swept through the settlements like a dark cloud. An unknown swarm of alien creatures was approaching, and the locals were panicking. Many alien species had already fled, leaving their homes behind. The few who remained could feel the impending danger looming closer each day. In the center of the largest colony, a command center buzzed with activity. Human Marines, known for their bravery, were assembling for an urgent meeting. Captain Sarah Blake, a strong and determined leader, stood at the front. She was respected by her team, and her presence commanded attention. As the Marines settled down, she looked at each one of them, her green eyes filled with resolve. "Listen up, everyone," Captain Blake began, her voice steady and loud. "We all know what is coming. The swarm has been spotted, and they are heading our way. We cannot allow them to destroy our home. We stand together as a team, and we will fight." The Marines nodded, their faces a mix of fear and determination. They knew the swarm was massive and ruthless, but they also knew they had trained for this moment. The Marines had fought together before, and they understood the importance of unity. Blake continued, "We may be outnumbered, but we are not weak. Our strength lies in our training and our loyalty to one another. We will prepare defenses and fight for our colony." As she spoke, the tension in the room began to lift. The Marines felt a sense of purpose growing within them. They knew their leader believed in them, and that made all the difference. Each Marine had a job to do, and they wasted no time getting started. Some gathered weapons and ammunition, while others set up communication systems to keep in touch during the battle. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The beauty of the planet contrasted sharply with the fear in the hearts of the colonists. The colony's inhabitants watched from a distance as the Marines prepared for the worst. They hoped for a miracle, but they also knew that hope alone was not enough. As night fell, the Marines set up defensive positions around the colony. They dug trenches and built barricades, determined to create a stronghold against the incoming swarm. The sound of clanging metal filled the air as they worked tirelessly. Captain Blake moved among her troops, offering encouragement and checking on everyone's progress. She made sure that each Marine was equipped and ready for the battle ahead. Just as the last barricade was in place, a chilling silence enveloped the area. The Marines paused, looking toward the dark horizon. A sense of dread washed over them. The calm before the storm was palpable. They had trained for this, but the reality of the situation weighed heavily on their minds. Suddenly, a distant rumble echoed through the night. The ground trembled slightly beneath their feet. Blake raised her hand, signaling for silence. The Marines held their breath, listening intently. From far away, a faint but eerie buzzing sound began to grow louder. It was the swarm. Captain Blake's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. "Get ready!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. "Stay alert and focus on the task at hand. We are human Marines, and we will not back down." As the buzzing grew louder, the Marines took their positions, weapons at the ready. Each Marine felt the weight of their duty. They were the last line of defense, standing firm while others had fled. The colony depended on them, and they were determined to protect their home at any cost. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, they waited for the swarm to strike. The peaceful night was about to shatter, and the Marines were prepared to face whatever darkness lay ahead. They were united in their purpose, ready to stand their ground against the approaching storm. The night air on Viridia grew thick with tension as the Marines stood guard, eyes fixed on the horizon. The buzzing sound grew louder, a chilling reminder that the swarm was drawing near. Captain Sarah Blake paced back and forth, her heart racing. She could feel the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. The Marines, her loyal soldiers, were ready, but she knew the battle ahead would not be easy. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. The Marines exchanged worried glances, and Captain Blake raised her hand to signal for silence. The sound of wings beating filled the air, and dark shapes began to emerge from the shadows. The swarm was upon them. "Positions!" Blake shouted, her voice cutting through the fear. The Marines quickly took their places behind barricades, gripping their rifles tightly. The buzzing intensified, becoming a deafening roar as the swarm closed in. As the first wave of creatures attacked, the Marines opened fire. Bright flashes of light lit up the night as lasers shot through the air. The creatures, large and menacing, charged forward with incredible speed. They had sharp claws and glowing eyes, and their wings made a terrifying sound as they flew. "Keep firing! Don't let them through!" Captain Blake commanded. She fired her weapon, taking down the first creature that came too close. The Marines worked as a team, communicating with each other and covering one another's flanks. Despite their efforts, the swarm was relentless. More and more creatures came, pushing against the Marines' defenses. The sound of their screeches filled the air as they crashed against the barricades. One by one, Marines fell, but their courage never wavered. They fought on, determined to protect their home. "Fall back to the secondary position!" Blake shouted as she noticed the barricades starting to give way. She knew they had to regroup if they were going to survive this onslaught. The Marines quickly moved back, keeping their formation as they retreated. As they reached the secondary position, they quickly set up their defenses again. Captain Blake scanned the area, her heart pounding in her chest. They had to hold this position at all costs. She rallied her troops, reminding them of their training and their duty to protect the colony. "Remember your training! We are Marines! We do not give up!" Blake yelled, her voice steady and strong. The Marines responded with a renewed sense of purpose, focusing on the task ahead. Just then, a massive creature emerged from the swarm. It was larger than the others, with a menacing presence. Its wings flapped powerfully, sending gusts of wind that knocked Marines off balance. Captain Blake's heart sank as she realized this was the swarm's leader. "Everyone, focus on that creature," she ordered, pointing her rifle at the beast. "If we take it down, the rest of the swarm will fall apart." The Marines aimed their weapons at the creature, their hands shaking with fear and determination. They fired in unison, bright beams of energy streaking through the air. The leader roared in anger, deflecting some shots with its powerful wings. It charged toward the Marines, determined to break through their defenses. "Keep firing! Don't let it get too close!" Blake shouted, her voice full of urgency. The Marines continued to shoot, their hearts racing as the creature drew nearer. They felt a mix of fear and bravery. They had to protect each other and their home. As the leader lunged forward, one brave Marine named Private Jamie stepped in front of Blake. "I'll take it down, Captain!" he yelled, charging forward with a grenade in hand. With a final, courageous scream, he hurled the grenade at the creature just as it reached him. The explosion lit up the night, and a shockwave knocked everyone back. Smoke filled the air as the Marines struggled to regain their footing. When the smoke cleared, they saw the creature lying motionless on the ground. Cheers erupted from the Marines, their spirits lifted by this small victory. "Good job, Jamie," Blake shouted, her heart swelling with pride. "Now let's finish this fight!" With renewed energy, the Marines pushed forward, determined to take down the remaining swarm. They fought with everything they had, knowing that this battle was just the beginning. Together, they stood their ground against the storm, ready to protect their home no matter the cost. After the fierce battle against the swarm's first wave, the atmosphere in the Marine encampment was tense, yet filled with hope. Captain Sarah Blake gathered her troops for a strategy meeting. They had won a small victory, but the swarm was still out there, and they needed to prepare for the next assault. The Marines were tired, but their spirits were high. They knew they had to adapt if they were going to survive. "Listen up, everyone," Blake began, her voice strong and clear. "We've shown we can fight, but we need to think smarter. The swarm is not just mindless creatures, they have a strategy. They are organized, and they will hit us again. We must figure out how to counter their moves." The Marines nodded, taking in her words. They had seen the strength of the swarm, and they understood that brute force alone would not win this battle. Private Jamie, who had bravely thrown the grenade that took down the swarm leader, raised his hand. "Captain, what if we set traps? We can use our surroundings to our advantage." Blake smiled at his suggestion. "That's a great idea, Jamie. We can use the terrain to our benefit. We need to make the swarm think they are winning, and then catch them off guard." The Marines quickly began discussing their plan. They divided into teams, each responsible for creating traps using the materials around them. Some gathered branches and rocks to build barricades, while others set up explosive traps disguised as bait. The atmosphere buzzed with energy as they worked together, their camaraderie shining through even in the face of danger. As they worked, Captain Blake kept a close watch on the horizon. The buzzing sound of the swarm had become a constant reminder of their looming threat. She knew they needed to act quickly before the swarm regrouped and launched another attack. Time was running out. Suddenly, a sharp scream broke the concentration of the Marines. They turned to see one of their scouts running back, panic etched on his face. "Captain, the swarm is coming again! They're advancing fast!" Blake's heart raced. "All Marines, take your positions. Remember the plan." The Marines quickly moved into place, ready for the swarm's assault. They could hear the buzzing growing louder, and the ground began to shake as the creatures drew closer. As the first wave of the swarm charged in, the Marines stayed calm and focused. They remembered their training and the traps they had set. Blake signaled to her troops, and they opened fire, hitting the leading creatures with precise shots. The swarm was taken by surprise, and some creatures fell into the trap set by the Marines. As the Marines continued to fire, the first few creatures that fell into the traps triggered explosive blasts. The ground shook and the air filled with smoke and debris. The swarm momentarily hesitated, thrown off by the sudden chaos. Blake saw her chance and shouted, "Now! Advance and push them back!" With renewed courage, the Marines charged forward, pushing against the stunned swarm. They fought hard, taking advantage of the confusion. Private Jamie led a group to flank the swarm from the side, while others held the line, keeping the pressure on. But the swarm quickly adapted to the new strategy. They regrouped and began to change their approach. Blake noticed that they were now trying to encircle her troops. "They're learning!" she shouted. "Stay sharp! Don't let them surround us!" As the swarm tightened their grip, the Marines fought with everything they had. Blake saw a group of creatures trying to break through the left flank. She sprinted over, firing her weapon and taking down 2 of the creatures. "Hold the line! We can't let them get through!" Despite their best efforts, the swarm pushed forward, and soon the Marines were fighting to hold their ground. The creatures were relentless, using their numbers to their advantage. Just as things seemed dire, Blake remembered Jamie's suggestion about traps. "Retreat to the rear defenses!" Blake shouted. "We'll funnel them into our traps!" The Marines quickly fell back, leading the swarm into the area filled with hidden explosives. The creatures surged forward, believing they had won, but they fell right into the trap. Explosions rocked the ground as the Marines watched the swarm stumble and fall. "Now! Let's finish this!" Blake roared, and the Marines opened fire again, taking advantage of the disarray. They had turned the tide, using strategy to outsmart the swarm. The battle raged on, but the Marines now felt a renewed sense of hope. They were learning and adapting, just like their enemy. Blake knew that this was just the beginning, but as they fought on, she felt a surge of pride for her brave soldiers. Together they were more than just fighters. They were a united front against the swarm. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the battlefield. Captain Sarah Blake stood with her Marines, watching as the swarm regrouped on the horizon. The victory they had tasted just hours before felt distant now. The creatures were relentless, and Blake could see they were preparing for one final assault. This would be their last stand. "Listen up, everyone," Blake called, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her heart. "We've fought hard, but this battle is not over yet. The swarm is coming back, and they will hit us harder than before. We need to hold our ground no matter what. We are Marines, and we do not back down." The Marines gathered around, their faces showing signs of fatigue, but their eyes sparkled with determination. They understood the stakes. They had lost too many friends already, and the thought of giving up was not an option. Private Jamie, still riding high from their earlier success, stepped forward. "We've taken down their leader and surprised them with our traps. We can do it again, Captain." Blake nodded, appreciating his spirit. "You're right, Jamie. We know how they think now. Let's use that knowledge to our advantage." She quickly devised a new plan. "We'll split into 2 groups. One will hold the front line while the other waits to flank them. We'll lure them in and strike hard. Remember, we're fighting for each other and for our home." The Marines cheered, their voices filled with renewed strength. They took their positions, gripping their weapons tightly as they scanned the horizon. The buzzing sound returned, louder than ever. The swarm was coming. As the first wave of creatures charged forward, Blake signaled for her troops to open fire. Bright beams of energy lit up the dimming sky as the Marines unleashed their firepower. Creatures fell, but the swarm kept coming, undeterred by their losses. Blake felt a knot tighten in her stomach. They needed to hold their ground. "Stay focused! Don't let them break through!" she shouted, her heart pounding as she fired at the charging swarm. The Marines fought with everything they had, their training kicking in as they worked together to hold the line. But the swarm was vast, and the Marines were starting to feel overwhelmed. Just then, Blake saw a massive creature emerging from the swarm, larger than any they had faced before. Its wings cast a dark shadow over the battlefield as it soared toward them. "That must be their new leader," she realized. "Everyone focus fire on that creature." The Marines aimed their weapons at the beast, but it was quick and agile. It dodged their shots, getting closer and closer. "Fall back!" Blake shouted, leading her troops away from the front line. They needed to create space. The Marines formed a circle, protecting each other as the new leader charged forward. "Private Jamie, you and your team flank it from the left," Blake ordered. "The rest of us will hold it in place." The Marines moved quickly, following her orders. Jamie nodded and signaled his group to follow him. They moved silently, ready to strike when the moment was right. The new leader let out a deafening roar as it tried to break through the line. Blake could feel the ground shake beneath her feet. "Now! Fire!" she commanded. The Marines shot at the beast, their shots finding their mark. It staggered back, but quickly regained its balance. The swarm behind it seemed to grow more aggressive, pushing forward to support their leader. "Jamie, now!" Blake yelled as she saw her chance. Jamie and his team sprang into action, moving in from the left flank. They caught the beast by surprise, firing their weapons with precision. The creature roared again, thrashing its wings and trying to escape, but the Marines had it surrounded. With renewed energy, the Marines focused their fire on the new leader. The creature stumbled, its wings flapping wildly as it struggled to regain control. "Keep shooting! Don't let up!" Blake shouted, urging her team on. The Marines poured all their firepower into the creature, each shot a testament to their resolve. Finally, with a final desperate screech, the leader fell to the ground, its body hitting the earth with a heavy thud. The swarm hesitated, thrown into disarray. Blake seized the moment. "Now! Push forward!" she yelled. The Marines charged, their hearts filled with determination. They were fighting not just for survival, but for each other. As they pressed on, the swarm began to scatter, losing its cohesion. The Marines fought bravely, pushing back the remaining creatures. With each step forward, they felt the weight of their victory. The battlefield was theirs. The Marines stood tall, their heads held high. They had faced the swarm together, and they had won. But Captain Blake knew that the battle was just one part of a larger war. "We did it, team," she said, breathing heavily but filled with pride. "We stood our ground against the swarm, and together, we will continue to fight." The sun rose over the battlefield, casting a golden light on the remains of the swarm. Captain Sarah Blake stood with her Marines, surveying the scene. They had fought hard, and now the silence was a welcome change from the chaos of battle. The Marines were exhausted but alive, and that was what mattered most. They had faced a relentless enemy and emerged victorious. As the last remnants of the swarm retreated into the distance, Blake felt a wave of relief wash over her. She turned to her team, who were catching their breath and tending to their wounds. "We did it, everyone," she said, her voice filled with pride. "We stood our ground when it mattered most, and we won." Cheers erupted from the Marines, their spirits lifting with every shout. They hugged each other, clapped each other on the back, and let out whoops of joy. Jamie, the young private who had led the flanking attack, stood with a big smile on his face. "I can't believe we actually did it, Captain. We showed them what we're made of." Blake nodded, her heart swelling with pride for her troops. "You all fought bravely. Each one of you played a part in this victory. Today, we have proven that humans can face even the toughest enemies and come out on top." As they began to clean up the battlefield, the atmosphere shifted from one of tension to celebration. The Marines shared stories about their experiences during the battle, laughing and joking as they cleaned their weapons and prepared to report back to base. The camaraderie they had built during this fight was strong, and they knew they could rely on each other. Soon, a shuttle arrived from the base, bringing reinforcements and supplies. As the new troops stepped off the ship, they looked at the battlefield in awe. They had heard about the fierce battle and were eager to help. One of the officers approached Blake. "Captain Blake, we heard of your bravery. You and your Marines really showed the swarm what we're made of." Blake smiled, humbled by the recognition. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us working together. We had to think on our feet and adapt quickly. Every Marine here contributed to this victory." The officer nodded, impressed. "Your leadership made a difference, Captain. The higher command has been informed of your success. They want to recognize your team for your bravery and strategy in the face of danger." Just then, a loud voice cut through the chatter. It was Colonel Harris, a seasoned officer who had been overseeing operations in the area. "Listen up, Marines!" he bellowed, his presence commanding attention. "You've all done something remarkable today. You faced the swarm when others fled, and you didn't just survive, you triumphed." The Marines gathered around, their eyes focused on Harris. "Your actions will not go unnoticed. Each one of you showed courage and teamwork. Because of your efforts, we now have valuable intelligence about the swarm and how they operate. This will help us in future battles." Harris paused, allowing the Marines to absorb his words. "I am proud to award Captain Sarah Blake the Distinguished Service Medal for her outstanding leadership and bravery. Jamie, you will also receive a commendation for your quick thinking during the battle. And to all the Marines here, you have earned the title of heroes." The Marines erupted in cheers again, their spirits soaring even higher. Blake felt a rush of emotion as Harris pinned the medal on her uniform. She glanced around at her team, knowing that this recognition belonged to every single one of them. "This isn't just my award," she said, her voice steady. "This is for all of us. We fought as a team, and we will continue to fight together." As the celebrations continued, Blake took a moment to reflect on the journey they had shared. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and overwhelming odds, but they had also found strength in one another. They had proven that humanity could stand strong against the fiercest of enemies. The sun set on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the battlefield. Blake looked at her Marines, knowing that they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had achieved victory, and together, they would face the future. They were not just soldiers, they were a family, bound by their experiences and their unwavering determination to protect their home. As the night fell and the stars twinkled above, the Marines gathered around a fire, sharing stories and laughter. They had triumphed against the swarm, but more importantly, they had found something even greater, a bond that would carry them through the toughest of times. Together they were unstoppable,